Good morning, and how is everybody doing today? All right, we are back for our weird and wonderful discussions with Strange Bones, and we are going to start the day off with our discussions on vampires. Now, we do need to start somewhere, and we're going to start as is proper and organized by starting right in the middle. And the reason we're going to start right in the middle is because, as it turns out, most of our understanding of vampires comes from the middle and not from the beginning. Now, vampires are pretty popular. Um, they certainly make great villains in movies. They apparently make great heroes in movies. I've got to be honest with you, I've never liked the movies where the vampires were considered to be the good guys at all. Twilight does not do it for me. Vampires are supposed to be bad. Um, I can put up with Blade because at least he's badass. But modern vampire movies really, they 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 lack the sort of awesomeness of the older ones, even if they've got better CGI. Um, you have to watch things like 30 Days of Night and uh, that kind of movie to really appreciate what awfulness vampires are. But that leads us to our course, our main point. What are they? Where do they come from? How do they originate? And do they only come out of Romania? Are they only found in the Transylvanian mountains? Well, let's start off with the man who was a very, very real man who inspired the greatest of the vampire stories, um, the one that sort of started off vampires as being a cool character in fiction. That is, of course, in reference to Bram Stoker's Dracula, which was truly terrifying in its day. And he was based on a very, very real man who we remember as Vlad the Impaler, the ruler of Wallachia, and he was quite a serious boyki. As a child, he was used as a noble hostage in the wars with the Muslims, and he had a rough life. He really did. He had a terribly rough life, but he was also a bit of a psychopath. And eventually, when he got older and he came back home, he was not only still involved in war, but the wars were very much closer to home. So all of this happened in around the 1450s, and he saw his father and brothers killed as he grew up, and eventually it came under war between Wallachia and the Transylvanian Saxons, who supported um, some of the other local leaders, and basically he just went completely and utterly nuts and plundered the villages, captured people, taken them to Wallachia, where he had them impaled. And peace only finally came around in 1460. Um, and at that point, just when you thought it was safe, you would be wrong, because then the war with the Muslims kicked in again, which was a very big thing around this time. And he was ordered to pay homage by giving monies and hostages and things to the Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed II, and Vlad basically told him no in the best way possible, which was to say that he took the envoys that came to tell him this and had them impaled as well. Then he attacked the Ottoman territory and massacred tens of thousands, Turks and Bulgarians, and caused a serious war. And of course, this thing, it just went worse and worse and worse. Um, he was known in his own way to be something of a hero as well within the area, because he was fighting for Christianity, which at the time that was the big thing to do. I think nowadays we'd all look on it in a bit of a dim light, but nevertheless, times were what they were, and it was pretty harsh. Eventually, of course, things didn't go well, and he was captured and imprisoned, and he was held in captivity in Visegrad all the way up until 1475. And the stories of his terrible cruelty spread all across Europe. He was eventually released at the request of the King of Moldavia, and he went on fighting in battles and so on and so forth until eventually he was killed in battle in 1477. Now, among these stories, he became really legendary. That's the bottom line. He was absolutely legendary for his strength, his incredible combat prowess, and his awful cruelty. And after his death, it was said that um, he was given the extra patronymic of the dragon. So Vlad the Impaler was known as Vlad the Dragon, which of course in Romanian is Dracul. So he became known as the Count Dracul, Count Dracula, the name of Bram Stoker's fictional vampire. So Vlad Dracul was said thereafter his death that he came back and was known to roam the countryside doing quite awful things and of course drinking blood. So he was said to be a vampire. Now, he certainly wasn't in any manner or form the first of these vampires. Absolutely not. It is a known fact that vampires were part of Romanian mythology, stories, for a very long time. And absolutely, we can say that it was well known that they were around. And in fact, in Romania, you had quite a few. I gotta say, Romania is one of those amazing countries that is sort of almost bifurcated in what it offers. It is one of the most beautiful landscapes in Europe. It is a stunning place with some amazing people that really are incredibly friendly, great people, wonderful food. But when the night falls, of course, you have the darkness and the mists and the strong and terrible mountains and the real things that you absolutely got, which included a whole ton of wolves and bears and all the rest of it. So it was a dangerous country back in the day. So, I mean, there was enough to be afraid of in the dark forests, but they also have some of the most amazing creatures and mythological horrors, from the Vodyanoi to um, strange plant-like creatures and things that will drown you. And I mean, vampires are pretty tame compared to some of the things that you're supposedly able to find out there in the dark. And of course, at the top of the list are their witches, which are, excuse the pun, which are the real kind of witch, which is to say that they are not nice. They specialize in curses, and even today, witches are quite feared and with reasonable cause, shall we say. But on the vampires, um, in Romania they are called moroi, from the Romanian word meaning the dead, but might have links to the Slavic word meaning nightmare. Now, alongside the moroi, you have the strigoi. Now, here's the thing. Not all vampires in Romanian mythology are dead. You can get living vampires. And in fact, it is said there's a third version which we will come to. Now, there's a serious link between witches and vampires. Um, but the main thing that makes a vampire, and this seems to be across the board, is that vampires drink blood. And they generally are considered to be absolutely nasty. The blood that they will drink depends. Um, Certainly, the strigoi, which seem to be either halfway to a witch or halfway to a living vampire, will drink the blood of animals as much as people, quite happily. But dead strigoi are more corpse-like, kind of like ghouls in a way. So they're definitely undead. Live strigoi become revenants after their death, but the moroi are more like the Bram Stokery vampire that we know. They all drink blood, yes, especially from their own family. Now, how do they become a vampire? Well, it was possible to become a vampire if you are born with a caul. Any extra nipples or digits or too much hair, you're pretty much stuffed. You're going to be a vampire. If you are the seventh child of a seventh child, all of the same sex, you're pretty much certain to become a vampire. Um, if for some reason a black cat crossed the path of your mother, vampire. If a pregnant woman did not eat salt or was considered to be a vampire or witch, pretty much certainly, kid's going to be a vampire. Um, if you were a child born out of wedlock, you were a vampire. Um, if you died an unnatural death or without being baptized, had red hair or blue eyes, you pretty much are going to be a vampire. So there's a lot of ways that people considered it possible to become a vampire. Vampires are quite a big deal in Romania, of course. Apparently, they bite their victims over the heart or between the eyes. Um, and if there are any sudden deaths around or suddenly open graves, you almost certainly got a vampire running around and causing trouble. And it was not unheard of as a reasonably common practice that graves were opened after about 5 years and checked, and they made sure that you were indeed still in there and still very, very dead. And if you didn't look dead enough, they would take steps, because after all, we can't allow the undead bouncing around and causing trouble. Now, this gives us a bit of a background in the most well-known of the vampires, but is this the only place that we get vampires? And the answer is absolutely no. Um, Vampires certainly have been found in other cultures from way, way before the Romanian version was made popular by Bram Stoker. There is absolutely a lot of stories from all kinds of cultures and for millennia, right back to the Mesopotamians and before. They do have certain points in common. The first one is that they are almost entirely blood drinking spirits. So we can say if it's blood drinking, it seems to be related to a vampire. However, not all of them are dead, and you can get living versions. And you can, it seems, and this is a common theme in many groups, you can have a child of a vampire and a human. And if you do, they are known as a dhampir. And it seems that these half and half creatures can go one of two ways. If they choose the path of evil, then it is uh, absolutely possible that they will become a vampire, first living and after their death, a proper undead vampire. But it is also possible that they can choose the path of goodness, in which case they gain unique abilities, one of which is the ability to know if somebody is a vampire, which apparently is very hard. Not everybody can tell at all. Vampires are sneaky like that. Um, but they can tell somehow, as can twins for some reason. But then Dhampirs are also able to have a number of interesting gifts, such as their extra strength and speed and the ability to charm people and control minds, very much in the line of the traditional Bram Stokery type. Um, Most of our folklore that is known today would pretty much have come from this Romanian, Central European, Transylvanian type of vampire. Um, a lot of our stories are like that, but it's absolutely true that this is a tiny, tiny part of vampire mythology from around the world. Um, One of my absolute favorite origin stories of vampires, which sadly I'm going to have to say is completely wrong, because there were many, many stories of vampires way before the events related in the story, but which certainly serves as a tale to show what people have always believed caused vampires to exist. Um, and that is the reality that the first vampire was none other than Judas Iscariot. Now, why would this be? And of course, it fits very well to the whole Christian viewpoint of the story of Jesus, and that what happened to Judas would be a, shall we call it, um, a sort of evil mockery of the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, of course, this fits in very strongly. Hey, Chantal. Um, it fits in very strongly with the theme of what makes a vampire, which is to say, becoming a vampire is a point of sin. Now, you have to commit a grave sin to become a vampire. Um, and certainly the first grave sin which Judas was guilty of was the betrayal of the Son of God himself. So I suppose that's about as bad as it gets. However, he compounded this particular sin with another sin which, for a very, very long time in Christianity, has been considered an extremely grave sin, which is that of suicide. Christian beliefs for a very long time, and until quite recently, have always viewed suicide as a terrible, terrible sin. And of course, Judas Iscariot is said to have hung himself. So, with a double grave sin on his soul, he was cursed to neither live nor die and come back as the first vampire. Um, it shows how societies have viewed this kind of thing. It certainly fits even with other religions and cultures as to what makes a vampire a vampire. But it's certainly about malevolence and evil, and as such, vampires pretty much have never been, Edward, I'm sorry, never been glittery. They are not nice, you cannot date them, and they will absolutely eat you. So, proper vampires are certainly the nasty ones. Um, the vampire evil spirit thingy can seemingly uh, transmit their vampirism in quite a few versions of this understanding. So that's where the idea of being bitten by a vampire comes from. And it is absolutely true that at certain times in history, there was severe mass hysteria in a number of areas in Europe and in other countries as well, where the fear of vampires have caused a slew of grave destructions and public executions in an effort to hold off these terrifying undead. And of course, there are a number of different ways that people found to hold off such things, different in different cultures, of course. But we can say that ultimately, living or dead, the things that make a vampire is that number one, they are absolutely blood drinking. Hey, Scarpy, I see you there. Um, awesome to see you. Awesome, awesome, awesome. So, absolutely, vampires drink blood. They can be living or dead, but absolutely, vampires are evil. They are not nice in any manner or form. So, the second trait of vampires is that they are evil. Um, they were often linked in certainly Christian viewpoints with the devil. Um, I would say that there are a number of related creatures that have similar traits, but are not vampires. But by and large, if it drinks blood and it's evil, it's probably some form of vampire. Now, the reason I say the wonderful story of Judas being the first vampire is not true is that we have even found excavated pottery shards with artwork on them and such from way back in ancient Babylon and further in ancient texts from Egypt. There have been blood drinking demon type vampire things right from the beginning. Um, in Hebrew mythology, Adam's first wife, Lilith, was banished from the Garden of Eden because she would not be subordinate, and she became the very first vampire, though she was a bit of a specific one, but we'll get to that in its due course when we do the Hebrew vampires. But, yep, people have believed in vampires for a very, very long time. Uh, what I find most interesting is how there's a great deal of similarity no matter where you go in how they are described. So, are they a thing? Should we be absolutely afraid of them? Or are we good? Are we good? I don't know. Hard to say. Let's look at the history first, and then we'll decide whether or not we think these things are indeed something to worry about. But send in your comments. Tell me what you think. Give me an idea or two as to what you believe vampires might be. I know that in the modern age we have extra kinds of vampires that don't fit the traditional role. Now, people will talk of psychic vampires that don't drink blood but certainly drain energy. Um, and legit, I'm certainly not arguing with that, that counts very much. But in the absolute traditional style, they are absolutely blood drinkers. Now, you might argue that blood is both a literal thing and also a representational thing. Blood is life, of course. Um, so, yes, that's possible. That's possible. But how far can we go with one particular thing? We need to set a few boundaries. So we're going to stick for the moment, at least, with saying to be a vampire, we're talking the blood drinking variety, and work it from there, because the draining of energy and so on and so forth is done by a lot of different things. So, if not Romanian, where else do we find vampires? Well, here's where it gets interesting. We have Jewish vampires, we have Babylonian vampires, we have Indian vampires, we have Greek vampires, we have Native American vampires, we have, of course, the Slavic and Russian vampires, we have African vampires. So, pretty much anywhere in the world that you go, you're going to get a version thereof. So, it's clearly a fear of some kind. And all of them are, if not dead themselves, then directly related in some way to the dead. So, absolutely, there is a link there. They drink blood, and in pretty much every single case, they are not nice. So we can't talk about good ones until you actually get to the modern age and you're dealing with Edward. Mari Griffin, hello, how are you? I hope you are doing great. So, having had a brief look at the Romanian version of these things, let's move on a bit and see some of the others. Now, Europe certainly lots and lots of vampire things. In ancient scraps of knowledge that we have managed to get, pottery shards and they pretty much agree, blood drinking, no problem, straight up. But we're going to begin with Mesopotamia. Many ancient cultures in Mesopotamia had these vampires. The Persians, absolutely. They were among the very first, and they had creatures that drank blood and wreaked havoc. Ancient Babylon, of course, had the tales of the mythical Lilitu, which in Hebrew is remembered as Lilith, and her daughters, the Lilu, who were said to have been some kind of blood drinking demons who most especially lived on the blood of babies. The Jewish texts say that Lilith was Adam's first wife and was chucked out of the Garden of Eden by God Himself, preyed on young babies and their mothers at night, though sometimes men as well, and was considered to be absolutely very, very evil. And very often parents would hang amulets around the child's cradles to protect them. So we shall see about that. Another version says that these things, these lilies, or Lilitu from the Sumer, said that she was an infertile, beautiful maiden, and who turned into a harlot and vampire, having chosen a lover. They never let him go and will basically drain them until they are dead. They were considered to be somehow anthropomorphic bird-footed demons, connected to somehow a night demon or a wind demon, and absolutely were sexual predators of note. You also had, of course, another one that was quite similar to the Lilitu in Babylon. You had the Lamashtu, which the Sumer called Dime, and the Galu of the Utkay group, who were absolutely vampires as well. Sometimes these things get a bit confused across. It's difficult to say why, but again, very much a case of preying on pregnant women and newborn babies, and they were known to snatch newborns from their mother to drink its blood and eat its flesh. Wherever she comes, says one of the texts, She brings evil and destruction. Men, beasts, trees, rivers, roads, buildings. She brings harm to them all. So, absolutely. And then the Galu, which again is associated with Lilith, were known as the evil ones. They threaten every house, rage at people, and eat their flesh, and let their blood flow like rain. They never stop drinking it. So there were absolutely a lot of very, very, very early vampires. Moving on to ancient Greece, there were several precursors to modern vampires. Though interestingly enough, none of them were undead. These were all living vampires. And of course, you start with the Empusa, the Lamia, the Striges, which in ancient Rome were known as the Strix. Though it did over time morph into referring to witches as well, which makes it difficult. Empusa was the daughter of Hecate and was described as a demonic bronze-footed creature that feasted on blood by transforming into a young woman and seducing men. She was the daughter of King Belus and a secret lover of Zeus, but Hera was not keen on this, as we well know this was a common theme. And when she discovered this, she killed all of Lamia's offspring, and swearing vengeance, Lamia then preyed on young children and drank their blood. The Strigas, of course, also feasted on children, but also adults. They were more bird-like or crow-like, and absolutely were thought of to drink blood and eat human flesh. And of course, it links up very much with the Romanian Strigoi in a number of ways, the drinking of the blood certainly. They appear in a number of Greek stories, including Homer's epic Odyssey, but in many cases, there's a twist to how it works in that the undead are also very insubstantial and cannot be heard by the living without first drinking blood, and the living cannot hear them without them drinking blood. So when Odysseus journeyed into Hades, he sacrificed a black ram and a black ewe so the shades there could drink their blood and communicate. So we are saying that there are plenty of these. We're going to carry on with our different cultures of vampires in the next live, so make sure you like, subscribe, and join me there. And yeah, let's see how far back we can go and what kind of weirdness do we need to worry about. Thanks for joining me, and have an absolutely fantastic, fantastic day.